video. Hello to everyone joining there. Just what's happening here at the moment is we're admitting people, and Porrick is going to be setting up the YouTube stream over the next minute or so. And shortly after that, I'm going to start explaining the basics about the referendum. So I will end up repeating these things just as we are clear that everybody's had a chance to join in and that we're happy enough that the YouTube stream is up and running as well. Is that the thumbs up for the YouTube stream, Patrick?
It is.
Excuse me.
We should be on YouTube.
Hi. Well, hello everyone, and it's like Guess Who here with all the black cards that I'm looking at. But we'll see how we get on. I'm here just as an anchor and just as a conduit for questions and answers on the student levy referendum for 2021. I'm going to read first what the text on the Student Union website is because not everybody's had a chance to read it, and just to give you an idea of what this is about. And after that there, we will be having questions. We will be fielding questions as well. I'll explain how that goes down in just a few minutes as well. But the wording of the levy that is on the Student Union's website is that with effect from 1st July 2021, the members of NUI Galway's Student Union approve the cancellation of the current student levy of €224, adopted in 2006, updating a levy approved in 2003, and further approve its replacement with a new student levy of €140 to be paid in that amount by full-time students and by part-time students on the full-time equivalent basis, to create a student levy fund with the total amount collected annually to be distributed on the basis of allocating 2.14% tariffs to Maclean, 10% to Came to be paid and administered by NUI Galway Students' Union, 4.29% to Flirt FM, 17.86% to NUI Galway clubs, 17.86% to NUI Galway societies, 3.57% to the projects fund, 15.71% to the Student Health Unit, and 28.57% to NUI Galway Students' Union, and also approve the student levy of €140 adopted for the academic year 2021 to 2022, be increased thereafter in line with consumer price index inflation. It's quite a mouthful, but hopefully over the discussion over the next hour to 90 minutes, depending on how we get on, we will be able to, the bits that are most important to the different people who've come along this evening will be explained by the people who've taken time out this evening to try and help along the process and explain the referendum. As regards asking questions, we're all here for questions. It's the main point of this event. If you want to ask a question, there are two people in the chat. One of them is called Send Me Your Cues, and the other one is called Message Me With Your Questions. You send the questions to those, and they will sort of pass them over to me, because I'm sort of in the process of, I can't read a million chats at the same time as talking and anchoring. So that's kind of the format, but just to get things started, I'm going to ask first, what is the proposed change? How would you explain it? And I'm going to just pass that question to Porrick to me to get us started.
Hi everyone. So the proposed change, these finally called time, mainly on the sports centre. The sports centre levy is the €100 that you pay of the 224. Along with that, we are seeing we're seeing increasing funding in clubs, societies, the Students' Union, and Flirt FM, along with the creation of the Came. But it does reduce, or the Ars Maclean Fund, student sports fund, and the sports centre. When we talk about this levy, it's a levy that you pay on top of the 3,000. So it's, you pay your €3,000 in fees if you're an EU undergrad, and then you pay also the 224. It's not covered by SUSI. It's not, no financial aid doesn't help you in this. You have to pay it no matter what. So this reduction is important because it's a barrier to education. So that's why students would have called on this for a couple of years. But their main issue and why this has been a thing for many years is the sports centre, and that's why we're here today. And it's also why we've had work on this for the last few years, and we've looked at trying to find a levy that students wanted and found fair.
Okay, just as well, while we're getting started off and give people a chance to type out some questions, as regards voting on Thursday, all registered NUI students are entitled to vote in the referendum. Full-time elections this Thursday. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, all voting in the referendum and SU elections will be conducted online. Polling runs from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Simply go to nuigsuelections.com, log in your campus account, and voting options will appear. An account will take place after polls close at 9 p.m. And I believe the polls is done by machinery and computers this year, so it won't be an overnight or a counting session this year. Are there any questions coming through at this point that we could start off with? I can hear typing. Okay, the first question that has been submitted is, will societies be affected by this change? If someone would like to address that question, can they hit the raise the hand button?
Just so we know, we don't have as co-hosts, we don't have a raise hand function. We have to physically raise our hand.
Okay. So if would any of the co-hosts like to address the question, will societies be affected by this change? And Rihanna, the societies officer, has volunteered for that question.
So at the moment, the levy would give an increase of around 90,000, depending on student numbers, directly for societies. But the Ors Macklin Fund, which is about €230,000, is a really important fund that manages student building and is very important to societies. And also we've got over €300,000 from the projects fund as well over the last few years. So the 90,000 doesn't really make up for that.
Okay, and on the same question, Park to me would like to contribute.
Yep. It would be worth mentioning, though, that no other university or institution has a levy like let's say the Ors Macklin Fund, which you brought up. No other place has one of those that you need to maintain a building to pay for its electricity, heating, the likes of that. If we compare ourselves to DCU, which have for example, a much better center up there, they wouldn't be paying any of those kind of fees. So it is kind of crazy to have like that. Imagine if our library also charged us when we went in. This isn't the state that we should be in. And then societies, the €90,000 is there because students believe that funding should go directly to these services. And when we also talk about the funding for societies and clubs, no other college in the country has a levy like that. They get enough funding from their institution that they don't need a levy. NUIG has the lowest amount of money that it gives to its club societies directly in terms of funding. It's about 70k to societies, and the levy is where they have to get most of their money. So it's quite, I'd be posing the question of why isn't the institution giving more money to the clubs and societies and having to rely on the levy?
So
okay.
Can I answer that very quickly?
Yes.
So we're not, in fact, the only society in university that has levies. Other universities have levies. UCC, some of their funding comes from levy to their societies. Also, there are very few student buildings in the country that actually have as much access for societies to their buildings. Many of them have a lot of commercial activities happening. UCC, for example, built a new student building. Societies have very little access to that. So just putting that out there.
Just while we have her here, I would like also to direct a question to Michelle Miller. Could you explain to us where the levy goes now, just to give people a picture of how it is currently being distributed?
Absolutely. So just to say that, as Rena said, a student levy is common across universities in Ireland, and the students choose to pay to provide additional ring-fenced funding for services and supports for students that are offered outside of education. And the university supplements this fund every year with 1.25 million. So currently, the levy helps to fund the Students' Union, the Student Project Fund, clubs and societies, Áras na Mac Léinn, the Student Health Unit, Flirt FM, and the construction of the Sports Centre.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Questions are starting to come in a bit faster now, so I am just going to pick through them in direct order as they come. So if you have asked a question, be patient. It's probably under my eyes here to the right, and I'll get to it as soon as everybody's had a chance to speak. There's a question in from someone called Fikra asking where society committees spoken to before this change was agreed. And sorry, Part 2 has raised his hand on that question.
Cool. So when we talk about the levy and like the history of it, even Sin put out an interesting article, like thread today, which shows how many years this has went back. Like we've talked about the levy for about 4 years now, and when we talk about, let's say, how much this one has cost, this was from working groups that we done last year with Claire. I was club's captain last year, and I would have been involved in it. And then the society's chair would have been involved in it last year too, and it has been ongoing throughout the year. You know, we've had SU Council who voted on this to bring it to change. We did a survey to find like that 140 was the max students felt like they were willing to pay. So that's where we got any of our consultation from surveys, from working groups, and throughout the years, you know, this has been worked on by many SUs past me.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, again, I'll be looking for someone to raise a hand. Will students' access to Áras na Mac Léinn and the health unit be restricted as a result of the change in funding? And there, I think it's a second part to that question. Where will the alternative funding be sourced from, and has it been secured for definite for Áras na Mac Léinn if this levy adjustment passes? I'm waiting for a hand now. So I'm going to throw that question out again to see if anyone wants to take it on. Will student access to Áras na Mac Léinn and the health unit be restricted as a result of the change in funding? Where will the alternative funding be sourced from, and has it been secured for definite for Áras na Mac Léinn if this levy adjustment passes? If anyone is able to address that one.
I think it's important to note that, you know, the reason we got to this levy and why we're, you know, reducing it, and especially let's say like the €100, is because we couldn't get to negotiate to the fact with the university that we shouldn't be paying this interest rate, and they believe that there's a 5.5 million debt. This is the problem. So we're here because that interest is still being charged, and we're going to probably hear, you know, that they may have to cut, but like, I'd be interested to know actually from the university what they will do, like full out, and it's not me, like what they will do, because this has come from this idea that they wouldn't forgo an interest that they made up from the way we see it.
Yeah, I might come back to that question if an answer comes forward. It still feels to be hanging in the air. I'm going to move to the next question for now, and we'll see if anything comes of it. Roisin asks if NUIG are not already abusing Áras with events such as the RT debate. And there's a second question from a Roisin. I'm not sure if the same one. We'll go first. Roisin asks if NUIG are not already abusing Áras with the RT debate.
Can you say that one more time? Sorry.
Roisin asks if NUI Galway are not already abusing Áras na Mac Léinn with events such as the RT debate.
Yeah, I think this is another question for the university that we found last year. You know, I would have protested with where societies who were coming up to varsities, you know, they missed out on the space, and it was given to the RT without any, like, you know, they didn't come to the students' union to ask, or students in general, of the impact it would have on them, and that was quite worrying.
Okay, that question, if anyone else, if there's any further contributions on it, I'll take it. There's a second question from Roshin F, possibly. Currently, there's a 60-40 split in the funding of the project fund, with 60% from the uni. Her concern is that if students pull funding, the university may do the same. Is this the case?
I might take that one on if that's okay. So the proposal in relation to the student project fund is to reduce the value taken from the levy by 75%. That's a very, very significant amount. It's about $250,000 that would reduce by. At the moment, the university on an annual basis put $500,000 into the student project fund. And it would be very difficult to justify an investment like that if the message we're hearing from the student union and the student body, if this was passed, that the fund is not valued. Because if the fund was valued, then we'd be absolutely securing the funding for that. So we have not made decisions on what would or wouldn't be funded, so we can't give those definitives. But it would be a difficult investment to justify if that was the message we were very clearly given.
I believe the message that we've gotten from students is because they didn't get rid of the fund, is that they still want to keep it, they still do value it, but they believe that they pay enough. You know, they pay 3,000, they have the second highest levy in the country, and that's more the issue. When we also talk about the projects fund, it's not all it's not all the levy. You know, it is students do pay about 40% of the split at the moment, but also it's in our license agreement, in the rental agreement for student union commercial services, like the likes of Sult, SU Shop, that 60k is meant to go to the projects fund every year, which hasn't been going for years, and that money was meant to be going into the projects fund and hasn't. So that's another issue that we're bringing, like that we're seeing, is that the fund hasn't also been like getting all the sources of funding it's meant to be. That's quite worrying. Students do value it though. We want to we have to double mention this. They do value it, but they pay enough.
There's a point come in that I should probably read out here in relation to Michelle Miller's contribution. It reads, sorry, I have an issue with the point Michelle Miller made saying students choose to pay a levy. The levy is obligatory and we're fined €200 if we don't pay by November 30th and a further 200 if we don't pay by February 28th. Is there any bounce back on that?
Sorry, Owen. Sorry,
yeah, carry on, Michelle.
Sorry, my broadband is not great. Mike, would you be able to speak, Mike?
Yeah, I can, of course, yeah. When we said the students choose it, the levy was brought together by a student decision previously, so that is the student's decision. The length of time for the levy was also agreed at that time, so that is a student's decision. So it's the only reason the levies collect is that comes from an instruction from the previous levy meeting going back, whatever it is now, 15 years. So the student body at that moment in time chose to have a student levy, and that's why we have it, and it's collected by the university on that basis. Once the time period comes to the end, then obviously it goes up for renewal, which is the case, as we're pretty much aware, in every other university. Students' Union in UCD have just decided to extend the levy there, and that's what they've asked for. Happens in UL and UCC, they also have levies. But it's under the instruction of the student body.
Okay, I'll let Pari come in there quickly and then I'll move to the next one.
Yeah, it would just be mentioned in the 2003 referendum, that's how far back that was when that was decided. It was also stipulated that we were going to be getting a waiver for people who couldn't afford it. This was like a big part of the campaign, was the levy wasn't going to be charged to everyone. You know, if you couldn't afford to pay the levy, you weren't charged. So this whole idea that people can be fined for it isn't actually in the spirit of what we had when we originally had that referendum so many years ago. We should actually have been protecting the people who can't afford to be paying €224 on top of everything else. You know, if you're on Susie, yes, you can get the 3,000, but €224 can be a lot, especially for families that are struggling, especially this year. So like that isn't there, and that's why I guess students are asking about the €200 fine and a possibly €400 fine if you fail twice. And that is a separate question of why are we fining people who are struggling to pay, and that is something we bring up separate. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to look at the next question here. The question is shorter. Why is an important resource like the project fund being defunded? And Michelle Mitchell, I can see you have your hand raised there.
Yeah, just on a point on what Park had said, not only is the fact that you will be getting the €200 fine the next semester, if you are applying for student assistance fund, you need to have paid your 224. And when it comes to students who genuinely can't afford the 224, they are being then penalized, being charged an extra €400 for the year, and they cannot actually apply to the student assistance fund.
You're on mute, on.
Sorry, John. Thanks for pointing that out. I was saying you had your hand raised as well there, if you'd like to contribute.
But I'm going back a little bit, unfortunately, just because the Student Project Fund, and I suppose it was raised in terms of its importance, and I'd agree, you know, like from, I suppose, the student perspective, this is money directly for student services with the small s. I mean, it's for students directly. So there's so many initiatives like active consent that got seed funding to get moving. They get other funding afterwards, but that mightn't happen. And it was like, we're the first in the country to get into that space. And I don't think there's anybody who could disagree. So it's, I mean, it's fantastic what has been done. Our employability award, for example, for students, you know, to improve job prospects and things like that are so important now. Particularly, you know, we're potentially going into a really tough time. We're in a tough time as it is in relation to COVID. So, you know, this helps 300 students a year, really improves their job prospects. Our sustainability strategy, we, you know, the seed funding from the Student Project Fund to get it moving. And when the surveys were done last year, what was the most important thing for the strategic plan? The students came back directly to say sustainability. And it's just, you know, that's, we were ahead of the game, I suppose, in these things. We got the seed funding from the Student Project Fund and so many other things, but these are just examples. Like for the moment, like when we go back, as soon as we go back, we have a new home for access for students with a disability and so forth, that a place where people can meet a professional in a place where they're respected, where they can be confidential, where parents can come in, whoever, you know, is important, and partners and so forth. So I suppose it's very important, you know, in terms of that, to remember that the Student Project Fund gives that funding, and the other thing that's really, really important around it is that the decisions are being made equally by students and by staff. So, you know, that's really, really important, and it's I suppose something we shouldn't lose sight of, that initiatives like this are potentially now in great jeopardy.
I just noticed while you were speaking there that Raina has raised her hand also. Raina, if you'd like to contribute.
Thank you. So I got a bit zoomed out for a second there. So just on the question of Áras na Moclainn, I know it was asked what is going to happen with Áras na Moclainn. So yes, I suppose we are very unique in the country. I work with all the other societies officers, and I have to tell you, they are green with envy, that we have a building with rooms that are dedicated to students, for students. Like they wanted mirrors for dancing, a kitchen so students can actually eat and cook their own food. This hasn't happened anywhere else. And the HEA's funding for colleges has dropped significantly. More students, less funding. So, and also they fund teaching and research and access. They're not funding sports centres. They're not funding the type of amenity that we have in Áras na Moclainn. It is extraordinary. The fact that we've been able to do so much great work transforming the acoustic rooms, creating a band room, a rehearsal room, all the different things that we have done. It is unique and it is very, very special. And I would be terrified, to be honest with you, that we would lose it.
I'm going to butt in here and just give people a weather report. I have about 11 to 12 questions in the queue at this point on different topics, and we're about coming up on half an hour in. So a short question here from Kira. Can levy referendum be broken into two issues? One, removal of €100 to the sports centre, and two, to reform the allocation of the remaining funding.
I might take that one, but I might just quickly mention that I know John and Rena came up there. When we talk about the projects fund and anything like using a project fund, it shouldn't be a limited fund. We shouldn't have, we should only have good projects because we have this projects fund, and we shouldn't be funding a building, let's say like Ars Machlein. The university has the funds to do this. It has 260 million in reserves. If we go by the planned forecast for this year, it's 8.6 million in surplus. Like they're in that, and you pay 3,000 already in fees that are meant to be for the student services, that are meant to be what actually pays for the things that you need. Other institutions also have great things that we don't have. In you could talk about anything. In UL, they have a robot that brings you your library books. We can compare ourselves but we all, loads of people have actually better things than us. They have much better buildings than us. But the important thing is we're actually overpaying for what we have. Students pay enough, and we have a surplus that we're not using. And then if we talk about, and then just directly on that question, the referendum, we only have one levy, so it's like splitting it up. It doesn't really make sense, because that's how you pay the one levy that we have. So I will say this reference called, so it's this, we need to have a decisive action. We have to have the decision on this one to know, do students feel like they're paying enough, which is what we were, this is what we were hearing, they felt like they were paying enough with 224, and that's why they were the ones that felt like 140 is fair, that we shouldn't be paying the second highest levy in the country, and we don't have every bell and whistle in the country either.
A new question here. Alex asks, and it's on a similar topic around funding and finance, and I think it might be something that repeats over the evening. Alex asks, without AML fund, could it fall to societies to maintain these facilities, and there is no security or certainty that the university will maintain AML? So that's, I guess, a question maybe towards the university side more so than the society side.
I might take that on as well, if that's okay.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah. No, there is no certainty that the university would be picking up that shortfall in funding at all. Ars Machlein costs about 200, more than 200,000 to run every year, and the proposal is that there'll only be 50,000 collected from the levy. That's a significant shortfall, and my understanding is that the proposal is that could be made up by commercial services. That means the use of Ars Machlein will disappear for societies and student activity in that, and I think that would really be a very disappointing thing to happen. But the university doesn't have any plans to pick up that shortfall in funding.
Okay, the next question sort of falls under the same bracket. I think Shar says that the SU have referenced uni reserves. Does the SU have a written agreement with the university to provide the additional funds to the project fund and Ars Machlein? If not, why should students support this if they may lose those supports?
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier. The whole reason why any of this came about was the fact that the university, or the belief that they should still be charging us 5.5 million more on the sports centre. We've already overpaid 5.1 million. The sports centre cost 15.7 and we paid 20.8. I know there are a lot of numbers here, but we have overpaid in interest. They have this idea that there's a 5% interest. There was no loan, so we haven't heard that the ECIB rates at the time, so the European Investment Bank rates at the time were 5%. But it was their own money. They built the sports centre, and they have it. They'll forever own the sports centre. They'll forever attract students with it, and they want to collect interest on this as well. To like that deal would be way too good, and if it's too good to literally be true, and that's why we need to pay less. We need to actually not be overpaying this when it's already a huge barrier to education that not even.
I'm gonna go back to the question though there, just because the bit with the question mark here is, does the SU have a written agreement with the university to provide the additional funds to the project fund and Ars na Maclean?
The university weren't ever going to give us a written agreement when we were threatening their 5.5 million income, though. That was never going to happen like that. They wouldn't agree to that, because why would they? You know, we're trying to reduce how much they get.
Okay, I'll move on to the next question. What are the plans for the large increase in student union funding?
The Students' Union. So when we talk about the Students' Union, it is quite separate from, let's say, clubs, societies. It's like the staffing is not, we don't get covered by the university. You know, our staff are all in the SU. And when we compare ourselves to other universities, we are probably one of the most under-resourced students' unions in this country. We're quite large. We only have 3 full-time officers. And if you compare ourselves to Trinity or UCC, they have 5 full-time officers. We've also seen that when we've had funding, that we've been able to fund a lot of things ourselves. We funded CAME on its first year by itself. We started the Explore program. We were actually able to create a lot of things ourselves when we had the funding to do so. So I think that's why it's important to fund our students' union, but also it shows that we can do a lot with it. You know, it is completely students' money. If the €3 is going towards the Irish language, because SU Council mandated that, it's more students' money than any other part of the levy.
There are 3 participants with raised hands at this time. I'm going to start with Sharon.
Thanks, Owen. I just want to come back on one of the points that Pádraig was making in relation to the costs of the sports centre. And he threw out a lot of big numbers, and I think at this hour, even none of us need to be thinking about big numbers. But the simple agreement from the 2003 levy was that students would pay €100 towards the contribution as the building costs for the sports centre, up to a maximum of 18 years. And that levy kicked in 2007 and would be due to be finished in 2025-26. That's really the number. That is what students voted on at the time. No other big numbers, just €100. With that, we still have 5.5 million in our accounts to be recouped. And I have, and the university has, no mandate to write that off as a bad debt. It is within our accounts. It goes through our finance committee and our governing authority. It gets audited, and the Students' Union are represented on our governing authority. They're also represented on our finance committee, and they would have seen all of that information. They're well aware of that. Our accounts are audited by both commercial auditors, KPMG, and the CNAG, and those figures are in our accounts and are signed off by our governing authority, who have representation from the Students' Union as well.
I'd like to move to Raina now, who's had her hand raised for a while.
Thank you. So it was just on the idea of consultation. Somebody had asked us earlier, and yes, indeed, the USCG, which is the body that oversees societies, were never asked to consult it. In any levy change up to now, there's been a huge amount of conversation with all people involved. Pádraig also mentioned the fact that you couldn't ask the university why would they give you something if they were trying to take something away. But in my experience, when you actually go to people and to negotiate properly and get everybody involved around the table, if you genuinely wanted to reduce the student fund, first of all, the 240 odd euro that people are paying now in 2005-06 would reduce to 124, and it wouldn't be index linked as this 140 euros is. Also, if you genuinely wanted to reduce the funding, why would you take the entirety of Ars na Maclean and actually put it towards CAME, which is actually a peer-led programme? Why not approach the university to pay that? Because it is, after all, a teaching area, not some other type of activity. And also, why would you take the projects fund and just give to the Students' Union? The projects fund is incredibly robust in how you apply for it. The Students' Union, I noticed, has got over 100,000 euros from it. Other units have got more, but yet 3 people from the Students' Union actually sit on the projects fund. So if the Students' Union has got so many great ideas, why were we not seeing these over time? Why is it now suddenly they need 250,000 and another 250,000 for CAME? If you genuinely wanted to reduce the levy, why would you be taking it from one, giving it to another, but not having conversation with anybody about it? Because I promise you, if we actually had a conversation, we could have looked at Ars na Maclean and said, well, where could we shave money off here? How much money does the health unit actually need? But nobody was consulted, and I find that extraordinary.
I'll let you come in quickly now, Pádraig, and then I'd like to move on.
Yeah, first of all, on Sharon Bailey's point, so 2003, the referendum happened. It said up to 18 years, and then in 2007, the actual 5% interest rate was was put on. This is what students wanted. They didn't wish they weren't going to be paying for this interest on it as well. So just on that point, and then on Rihanna's, we're not anti-student project fund. It's still there. We still want it there. Students still value it. Students wished only to pay 140 euros for maximum. That's what they found. That's what they believed. And when we talk about, let's say, the projects fund, it can only fund projects up to 3 years. It can't. It's like you can only go there once to start something off, and then it has to have its own income source. The university, if it has good programs and has good things that it wants to run, it should have a better funding structure that actually can keep these going. Consent, it doesn't last just 3 years. We shouldn't be having active consent for only 3 years. We should be having it continuously. That's why the projects fund, we need to have a better way of funding all these things, like even CAME. That's something we want to keep forever. It keeps students in college and makes their grades get better. So but we still value it. You can still start projects, but at the same time we should have a better income source, a better way of reliable funding. And consultation, all students are represented at SU Council. The working groups would have included the likes of the SOX chair last year, and like how I was on the clubs, I would have went to health unit too. We would have talked to them. So there's just no health rep on the SU executive, for example.
The three raised hands I had a little. Now there's hands raising everywhere, and the whole screen went blue. Raised hands there. It's not the convention we set out at the start, but the Sub Aqua Club has had their hand raised for a while. I will take that one question on video, but the rest I will be taken through the text channel set out at the start. But just because we've not discussed sport much at this point, and I'd like to let the Sub Aqua Club ask their question if they could be unmuted for just a second. Can I do that?
Thank you.
Hello there.
So we've been told that we're getting tens of thousands of extra euros for clubs to spend, but the loss of the amount from funding to sport from the Student Project Fund, which currently stands at around 200,000 euros per year, is far greater than this amount. So how is sport possibly going to benefit from this? Where is it being established that clubs will be able to get investment for sports capital projects with the reduced Student Project Fund? Many clubs, including the Sub Aqua Club, depend on this fund for once-off large investments such as equipment, even getting the clubs off the ground. And some clubs use the fund to exist at an accessible cost to students that wouldn't be able to join clubs like this outside of universities. Was this discussed, or is that next year SU's and clubs officers' problems to deal with and figure out?
Would that be for Mike Heskin or other?
I'll let Mike go first, and I'm happy to go too.
I know, Mike, you've had your hand raised on.
Yeah, no worries, no problem. I actually said that I'll start a bit, but I said that question is actually directed to Porrick, because the question is basically asking, is they're losing the Student Project Fund, which is actually essential to their existence. As Chloe's demonstrated there, that for people to access such as her club, the initial investment is massive, but they source that money on a regular basis through the Student Project Fund. In the last 5 years, we have taken 200,000 per year, which is basically almost €1 million, which has gone directly into the clubs from the Student Project Fund. That's a massive investment. And the level of student involvement, the safety equipment that has been bought, the amount of equipment that can be bought that students couldn't afford to buy, but now is available to them, right up to date equipment, has been fantastic. So without that project fund, they're going to struggle. You're going to ask the committees to go right back to fundraising on a yearly basis for capital investment. Most of them are trying to fundraise just to meet the current expenditure. So I think that's Chloe's point there, which I think is very, very important. So this movement is a huge change. Sport isn't about just putting on a pair of runners and going for a run. It's everything from equipment, transportation, safety officers, equipment to go up the mountains, all the 46 sports, all of them need a massive amount of investment. And the way we do it is we give the money to the students and they decide what they want to buy. And they do it extremely well. And the Student Project Fund is key to that. And we need to trust them and give them the money. It doesn't need a students' union to decide what they spend the money on. The clubs and the societies are well capable of doing that themselves and have done so for many, many years. And I think we're being disingenuous now taking the funds away from them. And that's not a good move. The money we're going to get in addition is only less than a third of what we're going to lose. So it's a huge area. The other thing I would just say is in terms of the levy, is that all universities have levies. The UL levy, it doesn't even have a limit on it. They have a student levy towards capital investment in sport, which has no time limit on it. They've committed to 7 projects, and only when those 7 projects are complete will the levy end. And that was brought in by the students themselves. They also, by the way, bring the levy in where they have a minimum number of votes. It isn't just an open round. The student union actually have to get a quorum for a decision to change. It's not a simple majority. I think that's very, very healthy. In UCC, they also have a levy, and in UCD, they also have a levy. And this, again, is decided by the students' union, or by the students themselves, in consultation. So I think the university would like the students' union to have a really detailed conversation with the committees of the students' clubs and the student societies and ask them what they wanted. And I think they would have got huge amount of input from a huge group of very intelligent people.
Yeah, can I? Oh, Owen, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm going to go to John Hannon. You've been waiting a while there with your hand raised if you want to make a contribution. I know the questions are crossing over, but there is a lot to get through this evening. John, you're muted if you, sorry.
Okay, thanks. You got me back this time. So yes, I was coming back to just the student project fund, I suppose, in the theme, and it's gratifying to hear there's so much positive about it. And I suppose it's really important to remember that some of the initiatives, the majority of them, to be frank, would never see the light of day without the student project fund. You know, the reality of it is the likes of active consent, for example. We all know that it's a major issue. We were able to get money, and remember, 60% of that money is directly from the university in any case. But, you know, students and student services decided this was really, really important. And then after 3 years, yes, there has actually been additional funding for active consent coming from the university and from other sources. So it's great to get something in early so that we react. If there is an issue that we can, you know, the students, we survey people, we know what's happening. And okay, there's a good system, a robust system to apply, but immediately we know it's not in competition with anything but the direct service for a student. And it's very positive that the students obviously are involved in that decision, but also that it has a certain amount of time. You have your seed capital, you've made your case, because we all know in order to bid for funding, not only for the university, but for anybody outside, like we've been successful in getting other funding from outside and co-funding for projects because we could prove the case. And I suppose that's what's really important about it, that you get your seed capital, you can react and provide a service or try out something immediately there, and then you're in a much stronger position, having proven your case, to get additional funding or co-funding. So thank you, just to make sure that that point was clear.
Mute again on. You're muted on.
Sorry for muting and miming speech there. I am looking at about 30 questions in the message box. Now, there is the convention here that there is an account called Send Me Your Questions and message me your questions. If you send questions to those rather than to me directly, because what's happening is that they are piling up intensely at this point, and we will be here till 2 or 3 in the morning. There is, I've been reading through the questions as well, and there are similar questions from other sources. So I will probably be combining similar questions together, if that's okay with the people submit them. If it's not, obviously write to the accounts and get back to us, and I'll try and pose the questions better. Porrick, you have your hand raised there.
Yeah, I might just try to hit the last 3 points if that's okay. First of all, when we talk about the project fund, it's a fund that creates this illusion that you know, that there's money that we can all get. It's quite a limited fund already, and it should actually be much bigger, and the university should actually be funding much more projects. You know, sport. I was clubs captain before, and previous that I was swim captain, and we struggled to have all the money you would need to just run a year as a club. You know, and how much money we were getting all clubs get 300,000 euros from the levy, and they were getting 84,000 from the university. This is abysmally low. And it's so low for a club to be able to from its university be getting that little. Like every other institution gets the money from its institution normally through the 3,000. I know people were comparing themselves here to other institutions. You know, they said UL, their levy is about €90. DCU is 43. Like there's much cheaper levies, and they're able to do more and better. You know, we compare ourselves, when we compare ourselves in sport, I think we're punching above our weight for how much money we put in. We do much better than we should based on the amount of money we do. And if we wanted to properly put investment into it, we'd actually be probably doing much better and attract a lot more students. So we actually don't put enough from the university side, and that's a bigger problem. And if we had put enough in, we wouldn't need to be applying for these project funds, because there'd be money there from the university to fund these items that we need.
Okay, at this point, Rena has her hand up. I'll go to you briefly, Rena.
Just very briefly, just reacting to Pádraig's comment a while ago about consultation. So there was literally nothing came across our desk, nothing came to the USCG, not from the SOCS chair from last year. So I'm not too sure who has been consulting with who, but definitely not with us. And the amount of consultation we had in 2006 and for the other levies was extraordinary, where we all came together as a group with the students' best interest at heart, ensuring that what we were doing was transparent and literally negotiation with the university. Pádraig told me earlier that they didn't include SOCS and clubs because they thought it might that the university might be upset with us. We have never been afraid of the university being upset with us. We're part of the university, our members are students, and we represent them very well. So we didn't need your protection, but thank you all the same. There was a discussion about the project fund. We have launched so many exciting, innovative ideas by just going with an idea and showing people how it works. Like the kitchen, the hub, people didn't get that until they saw it. So sometimes you actually need a little bit of support to get something off the ground, and then people get what you're talking about. So we started off in a little weird box in the hub, which had been set up at the Student Union and it left sitting there. Student Union had a cafe in the hub that was just closed down one day. 6 months later, we were able to move in there and use it. So honestly, talking to people, this could have been a wonderful experience for everybody if we had spoken to each other and to the university, and we could have achieved something extraordinary. Instead, we're moving money from one place to another. Doesn't sound good to me.
I might just react to that. From what I understand, societies were invited to the working groups, and it's actually the first time I ever met my vice president Roisin. She was part of one of the societies, and that's why she went along. It was the first time I ever met her. So it was all these things were open to students, and they always have been. You know, every part of it, and this has been talked about for years on the levy, and it's been the university. We've met with the university. I met with them twice this year. Or my predecessor would have met with them about twice last year, and we were talking about the levy, and the issue is the 5.5 million that we have with it, that we're paying interest on a building that we shouldn't be paying, and that's why students drove this. It's why people, most people had it as an election promise for the last few years. It was almost like bring back Rag Week, being in many people's manifestos, and that's why we're here today.
Yeah. So just very, very quickly, so the €100 is one issue, but the fact that you took the rest of the levy and actually changed it, like the Society's office, we work so closely with Orstamachtlainn, and yet you wouldn't ask us how would we cope with 49,000, when in fact Orstamachtlainn costs 115,000 and double that, as Sharon said earlier, because the university actually put 50% in to Orstamachtlainn. So it's a very expensive building. It's a big building. And I don't know where you picked the €49,000 that ultimately we're going to be getting. It's going to sort out. But again, a conversation with the people who actually understood the issues would have helped greatly. But that didn't happen.
Students felt that 140 was the max they were willing to pay, and it's one point that we shouldn't be paying for the electricity for a certain building. We don't do that. So
they could have paid 140 if the Students' Union wasn't getting an extra 250,000 for themselves and 250,000 roughly for Kane. So if you genuinely wanted to sort out the students' problem, you'd have had a conversation with all the people involved to see what would work and could work for everybody, but you didn't do that.
The people involved are students, because students are the ones that have to pay this, not staff, students. It's not, as I said before, it's not covered by Susie, it's not covered by anything. It should be a student levy that this is what students are willing to pay for and students want to pay for, and that's it.
And the USCG were not consulted and they looked after societies.
You know, SU Council is made up of a wide ranging of group. We've 600 class reps. This is the important that the Students' Union is for everyone. It's every student.
I think you're on mute, Owen. You're going well there, but we can't hear you. Owen, I think you're on.
Yeah. The conversation has gone. It seems to be between two people at the moment, and there are a lot of people who have taken time out this evening to ask questions. So from here on, considering it's 10 minutes to 8 at this point, I would ask people for brevity and to make your contributions and maybe avoid back and forths from here on if possible. Get your information across on regards to the question being asked, and we'll move on from there. Mike Heskin has had his hand raised for probably 5 or 6 minutes now. If you'd like to make a quick contribution, and then I'll move to the questions from the floor.
Just some facts, because Park refers to 85,000 as the contribution of the university to clubs. The correct figure is substantially greater than that, and I'll give you the figures for the year before COVID. 85,000 came to clubs. In addition, 104,000 went directly to clubs from our operational budget. We then pull in 180,000 from the foundation. So that together is 369,000 that went straight to the clubs. In addition, 85,000 then goes to the athletes who are involved in the scholarship program. Those figures together comes to 454,000 go directly to the students for current expenditure. That's what comes in from the university's coffers, 454,000. That doesn't count almost another 400,000 that's spent annually for the upkeep of Dangan and all the sports facilities up there, which is a whole different area entirely. So currently the spend on sport is roughly about 1.2, 1.3 million per annum. So it's not 85,000 euros as Porrick keeps referring to. It's substantially greater. And I think anybody who sits down for 5 minutes with an envelope and looks at 46 clubs and see what happens and see the level of infrastructure and can work out that it's not 85,000 just for clubs. So I just want to correct that the record for that. Thank you.
Okay, just for people watching in, there are around 30 questions stacked up. And as I say, there's been a lot of back and forth between people here, but I'd like to keep answers kind of brief, even though I understand that there's a certain amount of detail that must go into answers in such a discussion. I'd like to thank people who've been staying here for so long and being so patient as well. Obviously, the topics may not relate to you, and topics that concern you might not have come yet, but hopefully we can spread it out a little as we move on. A question Joe asks is, why is the university unwilling to make a commitment that it will not remove facilities from societies, particularly in a pandemic? Would anybody representing the university like to take that question? I'll just read it once more in case it didn't go out. Why is the university unwilling to make a commitment that it will not remove facilities from societies, particularly in a pandemic? Sharon has her hand up.
Yeah, I'll just come in very briefly there on. I think it's important to reiterate that the proposed changes in the levy and the reduction in funding for Áras MacLean is coming from the Students' Council, not from the university. So like the university are not proposing any change here.
Okay.
It's the students.
Okay. Kira asks, why does the university have 260 million in reserves if we're paying for the electricity of a building?
I'll take that one again, Owen, if that's okay. The university is very, very old. We have some iconic buildings that are worth a fortune, but we need to have stewardship for the future as well. So as a group between students and staff, the beautiful facilities and everything else that we enjoy today is because somebody looked after them very well for many, many years so that we could enjoy them now. And it's our job to do that for the future as well and maintain stewardship. Reserves are not available for recurrent funding at all, and they never are. So that's the situation that we're in. Every year we do a budget and we have to make sure that we live within the income that we're taking in. So all we can actually commit to spending in a year is what we know we'll take in.
Okay. There's a question here. Where is it? Emily asks if you question Park's comment on consulting the health unit, as the health unit says the opposite.
Okay, two things I might just comment. The university, I know you said the reserves there, but the university is an 8.6 million planned surplus for this year. So that question can still be taken as, you know, there's a surplus planned for this year and has been for a couple of years. There's been surpluses. And then on consultation, I would have rang the health unit to just kind of see, you know, what would an increase mean for them. And the message we got back that an increase would be going towards a psychiatrist that they've been looking for years that would help students.
I'm trying to read through questions. 4 of the questions are you're on mute, Owen, which is that narrows it down a little bit. A point from the enemy SOC to clarify: no one disagrees with the fact that the levy needs to be reduced on any side of the debate. We're unhappy with how it has been decreased. That's more comments, but it is a comment and it deserves airing. Lots of questions on SU finances. Do they have reserves? Why do they need extra funding? Can Porrick explain what the company SCML Toronto is? He is the director.
Yeah, so the Students' Union is a private entity. So unlike, let's say, the university, which is a public entity, if we go bankrupt, we're gone. The Students' Union is gone. That is it. And we wouldn't be representing students. We wouldn't have officers there to help them. So that's why I guess the funding is important. And also we wouldn't have any way of a reserve of 260 million. We never would. But we would like to have a couple of thousand there just to mean that we could, I don't know, survive a month. But it's important to note that, like, a private sector, because we are private sector, we don't have reserves, we don't have the government backing us up if things go wrong, and that's a difference between a public entity such as the university.
It's not a text question, but I will break convention very quickly. Lorraine Tansey has had her hand raised for about 6 to 7 minutes now, so I'm going to give her a brief opportunity to come in there, if that's okay. Bless you, Emma. I don't know if Lorraine is still there. She didn't respond to that. If she comes back.
Sorry, Owen, I couldn't unmute. It just said guest, can't unmute. Anyway, good evening, everyone. It's really lovely to see you all. Thank you so much. And listen, come here. You know me, love a good bit of democracy. This is fantastic. Love to see student interest and appetite. I suppose our big concern, in just to state it, is that Alive is a wonderful, we hope, neighbour and occupant of Áras na Máicléin, and it has been the Student Projects Fund and the Áras na Máicléin Fund that has really, I suppose, allowed students within the Alive programme to really thrive and grow and develop. And so just to state that they were not in any way that we know of consulted or shared with or engaged with in this process in any way. It came as a shock when we saw it on social media. So, you know, that kind of really saddened us. Having said that, you know, we're keen to engage. And I suppose one of the things that we would like to know from the union is the additional €14 going towards the union that would have been in the projects fund, where we could all access it and potentially, you know, react to contemporary needs that arise from students. 10 years ago, no one was talking about consent. You know, you need the projects fund for emerging issues. So the €14 being extracted from that fund and putting into the Students' Union. What's the plan from the Students' Union in relation to that additional €14 you've allocated yourself in this budget? Thank you.
Cool. I'll take that if that's okay. Thanks, Lorraine. So when we talk about, first of all, the projects fund, or actually, I suppose when we talk about the Students' Union, what it can do with money, it goes back to us being very under-resourced. You know, we only have 3 full-time officers, and if you compare ourselves to, let's say, Trinity in Cork, I know I said this, they have like the likes of 5. And when we've had funding, we were able to start things like CAME, and we were able to fund that. But long term, the dream would be to follow the UK Students' Unions. You could follow them and have living co-op, so accommodation that is owned by the Students' Union, that is basically so minimum bare costs that it doesn't run for profit. It runs just for students to be able to afford a college at the bare minimum, that'd be less than even how much the university charges, and that would be the dream. And then when we talk about compensation, because you mentioned that too, students, there was a lot of students involved in this, and we would hope that that people involved in Alive or anything like that would be class reps and involved in the whole part of our democracy too.
I'd like to take a quick weather report, and there's a lot of people here, obviously, who've been typing in questions and listening for an hour now, and maybe without asking more questions, this is a student levy information evening. That's the point of us organising this event, and the point of all these people giving off their evening time to inform you. There are the reactions at the bottom of the screen. There is the cry react, and there is the heart react. If people are feeling like they are more informed on the student levy at this point, that they feel more comfortable going into a referendum, can they hit the heart button? And those who would wish to hit the cry button, can you wait a second till we see how many hearts and how many cries are coming up? And I'll go to gallery view. I'm seeing one cry react. I'm seeing one heart react, 2, 3 cries. So there are 3 cry reacts there at least. I don't have absolutely everybody on screen. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay. I'm going to say at this point the majority have been cry reacts, which is, I think that's funny, but it needs to be addressed. We're here for a student levy information evening. I'm going to maybe ask people to maybe just not everybody who had cry react, but maybe detail what has not been answered in this evening that we could address in the maybe next half hour or so. I don't want to keep you here until bedtime, but if maybe could to send them to the account, send me your questions or message me your questions, and maybe we can address the things that you feel have not been addressed so far by the student information evening. And I'll give that a second, and I'll catch up on reading my questions while new things come to light. Everybody can take maybe a second to breathe as well. Okay, I see 4 to 5 questions here, and I'm going to run through the 4 to 5, and I will keep an eye as more come in, and hopefully we can address some of the cry reactions that have been floating around over the past while. Chloe asks, why was the SU unwilling to consider the university's offer of a 50% reduction over twice the length of time?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. So when we talk about interest, we wouldn't be happy in taking that, because the whole point of this all is because we shouldn't be paying interest. We shouldn't have been paying the already 5 million we've paid them in interest. It was a building they own, they use their own money to buy it, and then students were going to pay back the building costs. That makes sense, yes, but then why are we paying back 5% interest, which is 10 million?
Okay, I'll take that as a point of ethics that decision was made. I'm going to move to the next question. Question from Fee, and Adam asked if Porrick could be asked again, as he didn't answer the question. What is SU Chornta? Is it a shell company? What reserves do the SU have?
Yeah, it's a company, I think, with plans to basically just to hold the money. It's on behalf of the board of trustees, but it is just to keep the money for a year. There's reserves about I think it's a couple of 100,000, just to basically keep us going if we ever are in an awful situation where we don't have any funding. So then,
okay. Porrick has repeatedly not answered questions. There were about 20 cry faces there. That's a comment. Next question, Emer asks, if the referendum passes, will Arsenal Maclean be closed down or taken away from societies? Can NUI Galway give a commitment to clubs and societies that their funding and facilities will not be cut as a result of this referendum? So 2 questions there. Will Arsenal Maclean be closed down or taken away from SOCs? And can NUI Galway give clubs to... We'll take the SOCs question first. If the referendum passes, will Arsenal Maclean be closed down or taken away from societies? Does anyone want to come in on that? I see no response from that. It will probably be a cry react.
I see Oisin there from the USCG has his hand up there. He might be able to answer that.
I'll let Oisin come in. If you, I didn't spot his hand. Sorry, do come in, Oisin, please. Someone's going to have to unmute him. It'll take a second.
I might just quickly mention, if the university can't answer that question, then how are we ever going to get the answer? Like, this is the problem. We're trying to answer these questions, and like let's say about Arsenal Maclean, and the people, we have the people here, and they can't answer it.
Okay, I'm going to let Oisin come in, and we'll return to the list of questions after that. So someone's going to scroll through 6 pages of participants and find Oisin Feely and unmute him, possibly.
Hi, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I actually have my hand up for a question rather than a answer to the question. Would you mind repeating the question? I might be able to give it a go. Or do we want to go straight on to the question I have?
The question that we were dealing with was if the referendum passes, will Arsenal Maclean be closed down or be taken away from societies? Was your hand raised for that or something else?
It was raised for something else, but I can...
Okay, do your something else. We don't need you to be grilled on this, but you can come to that after, but make your own point first.
Okay, it's on the SEML Toronto Porrick. So in late 2017, the company was formed, and I know you brushed this off as not pertinent to the levy, but I think it really is, seeing as the SU is asking for another kind of like quarter, how much is it? $250,000? But the company in 2017 offered a loan to the USI to fund to buy a building for the USI in Dublin. And I think the value of it was around $500,000, something like that, 480,000. And I'm just wondering, was this ever disclosed to the rest of the kind of SU, the students at large, the rest of the student council, like the SU council, and like how do you kind of justify this not being in the best of interest to the members of the union? And I suppose it kind of brings it back to, like, you're asking for a lot more money, but I could be wrong now, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, but this building wasn't bought, and there is 500,000 euros sitting in an account somewhere, that has just been undisclosed, and you haven't mentioned this in any of the things yet. You're asking for $250,000 more per year.
Yeah, I'll take that in 2 parts. So basically, the students' union, yes, had that money, and we did offer for USI to buy a building, but actually we were going to have a loan with interest. You know, it was going to be a proper loan with interest. With the interest was agreed at the start, and but it never went through. So we never had to go, you know, to any more formal agreement or go to SU council or anything, because it never, you know, progressed enough. And why do we have the money? It's because if we do go bust, God forbid, hopefully not, we have to pay redundancies for all our staff. We're a private sector business, and we would have to pay that. There has to be money there to mean that, you know, the people who work in the students' union aren't just laid off. It's just because, let's say if you're in public sector, the government would be paying that, but we don't have that luxury. We actually have to make sure that the people who fight for you, and that wouldn't be SU officers, it's the staff, you know, that have kids and stuff, that they're not just thrown out in the street, because that's important. You know, it's the same way your families would be entitled to that too.
I'm going to go to Sharon Bailey there. You've had your hand raised for a few moments.
Great, thanks, Owen. Just to come back maybe on one of the questions there, which was, I might be paraphrasing, but just to bring us back to where we were, would we be taking Arsenal Maclean away from students? The universities certainly have no intention to do anything like that. We would have very much concerns the proposal on the levy will not leave Arsenal Maclean with enough funding to operate itself. and it may then have to look at commercial activities. That would be our concern. There was a further question of, can we guarantee that clubs and societies won't lose funding? I'd be loath to take money off students for anything. So there are certain things that the university invest in that would be really tough decisions for us to stop investing in them. But there are certain things that I'm hearing loud and clear, and the Student Project Fund with this proposal on the table is not being valued. And the university, it will just be impossible when we have 5.5 million of a debt on our books to justify an investment of $500,000 a year in the Student Project Fund. And that's where we have real concern, particularly for the clubs and that, who have got over $1 million from that fund over the last 5 years in capital investment. And they're the sort of things that we're really, really concerned about, that, you know, maybe just this wasn't thought through properly, and had we all come together and negotiated on it, we could have found a better solution for students. So no decisions have been made by the university, but what is clear is that, you know, the 1.25 million that the university does invest in, all of the things that the levy invests in as well, that will have to be looked at very clearly about how we clear that 5.5 million debt. And those decisions will come into our annual budget process and go through our normal governance and everything. So it's not possible to give guarantees here tonight, absolutely not. The other comment I might just make that would concern me a little bit is the Students' Union talking about potentially going bust. And, you know, I think that's a worry, particularly when there's a lot of money invested in a year and they are actually looking for additional funding from students. I think students would want, you know, a little bit of reassurance about how their funds are managed and how they would be managed into the future as well.
Yeah, I might just take all that.
Keep it brief. I'm going to go around the room a bit more if I can.
Yeah, I know there's just a lot of accusations there. When we talk about our board of trustees and the people who help manage the funds and do all that, it's actually previous university presidents, such as like Iggy would have been on it, and also the previous dean of students. So we do have a board of trustees that actually manage it, and we aren't going bust, but it's always to be safe than sorry. I'm sure you'd understand that as well. And then like the university has 8.6 million in surplus this year. I think if it cared about its students to be able to fund all the things that it's saying is all great, and they could actually fund things more, you know, we should actually be funding all these things and not be talking about how, oh, the students should be paying for the electricity in the RS Mauchline building. We should be just funding this. We shouldn't be paying for a certain building with extra levies that are higher than the second highest in the country. So that, yeah, I'll keep it brief.
Mike Heskin, you've been waiting for a little while.
Yeah, sorry, no, it's just some information that I never heard of before it came up in the last conversation. I just want, Park, just confirm to me, is it what you're saying, because this is completely new to me. You're telling me that the Students' Union has a reserve of 500,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this would have came from our board of trustees.
I don't mind that. You just, is it a yes or no? Has the Students' Union got a reserve of £500,000, €500,000?
This isn't about the SU having.
No, I'm just asking a question.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's all. That's fine. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to get a second to read through questions. It's very difficult to listen to what people are saying and read questions simultaneously. So if you just give me a second, and also it's like a Smurf party with the amount of blue raised hands out there as well. Shar asks why the SU expects the yes vote with no guarantee of university funding. Could the referendum not be in two parts? That was asked earlier on, one on levy reduction and one funding allocations. I would say because the referendum has to pass a mandate very early on in the year to be actually taking part. So I suppose from a student body point of view, if you wanted a two-part referendum, it would be something to campaign for, I think, at this point. But the first part of the question Shar asks, why the SU expects a yes vote with no guarantee of university funding.
Okay. First of all, we don't expect a yes vote. It's a democracy. We have a referendum. This is we're you know, students will be the ones who vote on this. And when we talk about, let's say, the university not having they're covering this debt of 5.5 million, they wiped off 1.5 million without ever questioning like where this shortfall is going to come from. They reduced the interest rate when the Students' Union went questioning it 2 years ago, 3 years ago at this point, with Megan, and they reduced it to 1.7%. And there was 1.5 million euros of this debt just wiped off, and there was no, I wonder what was cut because of that. What, I didn't hear about any of that. Can we not just take it from the same pot as that? And we have to still remind ourselves of the surplus that is huge this year compared to even other years that the university is getting, and they're not refunding students. I've asked for this in multiple Finance Resource Committee meetings, and it's been basically laughed at.
Okay, there's a comment from Ciara O'Neill which would contradict what I just said, so it's important that I read it out. The other referendum, the removal of SU chair and addition of sustainability officer, was signed in for one part but is being voted on in two parts. So that's a point of information from Ciara O'Neill. Thank you for correcting me. I am going to address some of the Smurfs that have been lingering for a while now. Aoife O'Shaughnessy, I'd like to give you an opportunity to speak if you would be briefly unmuted. And as brevity is brevity and directness is what we need at this time of evening. You're still muted. I wonder, can I affect that myself? We can't hear you, Aoife. I'm sorry. No, yeah.
Oh, you can hear me now. Brilliant. Yeah, don't worry about briefness. I was just wondering, with the building, that the $500,000 reserve at the SU. So my first question really is, why was this? It doesn't seem very apparent from the minutes on the USI website that it was disclosed to the student council or the student body readily. So I'm just wondering, why was that information not like readily given out? Because that sounds like something that's quite important. $500,000 funding is quite important. And I was also wanting to know, there is very little information on the student union income and their expenditure as well available to the student body widely. And yet they're asking to get another 240,000 roughly to the union. So I was just wondering if you could precisely explain to me exactly how the financial decisions and reporting are handled and disseminated through the exec, the student council and the body. And if you can tell me specifically why you should expect the students to pay more money to a body that hasn't given us any actual proper evidence of actually needing that money.
Yeah, so I'll take that in a couple of parts. So the Board of Trustees is what kind of manages our funds. It's like they hold the union in trust. We've got people such we've got the people from CNG. We've got an old university president. We have dean of students there. It's people from who would have names who are quite important. And then the students' unions, like I guess, and how they spend it and how our expenditure and income. If you look up SU AGM, the SU NUIGSU AGM, we do it every year. We do an AGM like any body like this does, where we have our our spending, we have our income, expenditure, both sides. They're done every year. You'll be able to see every year. So once we've done a financial year done, and any student can actually email myself or the general manager of the student union to get it. It's always there and available. And I think the other question there was about the 500,000 for talking with USI. Yeah, there was an investment opportunity there that we consider, that we were asked if it was there. It was on behalf of the Board of Trustees to look for an opportunity for that money, because it is there in case you have to be ready for everything. You have to be ready, for a worst case scenario, just like the university will be. And but like, it's important to have that reserve there to fund a family if something went wrong. And it's not because it's not we're going bust. It's just it's correct to do the right thing. And even the university does that. They're going to say that their 260 million is some of that is to keep themselves afloat, but that's far in excess really of what they need.
Okay, I'm going to move on from that topic. Commentary, Jesus, Owen, this is just people ganging up on pork. Can we have some balance? The balance is I'm reading out the questions that have come in. So if the questions have been unbalanced, people would have to pose questions to the other side. I'm merely a conduit at this point. I haven't really been, I've tried to summarize the questions as best I can as I've gone along. I am going to go off script again once more. Roisin McLaughlin has her hand raised for about 25 minutes now, and she knows I can see her up there. Roisin, you can come in quickly, but do brevity, as we say, is the thing we need at this time of evening.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's just going to be really quick. Just on the consultation stuff, like am I going to be made feel crazy? Like, I was at the working groups. I was never involved with the students' union. I was never even a class rep. I was an auditor of a society, and I was on the committee for 2 years. And I saw the working group for the levy, to reform the levy, the emails on like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, like anywhere it could be, it was. So it was open to everyone, and societies and clubs. Clubs members were there, society committee members were there. If the society chair was there, then I don't know how UCSG can say that there wasn't consultation, because I do believe that they do meet with the society chairperson. So were they not asked about it? Like, was it not on the agenda? I don't know. And then my second point was just in regard, I asked a question at the very start, which wasn't taken. It was, is Arsenal not already being abused, such as in instances like the RTE debate? And Sharon Bailey said she finds it concerning that there might be opportunity for commercial events to take place. Well, they did. And was it concerning them because students weren't happy with that when we're already paying for it, and yet it already is abused? So why should we continue to pay for the upkeep of a building?
Okay, can those questions be addressed? Sharon, would you like to respond to that?
I suppose I'll just repeat what we've said earlier again, that the proposed change in the funding from Morrison McLean is coming from the student body within the referendum that students will decide upon. This was not an idea from the university at all.
Okay, while we have you, Sharon, there's a question which I think would be directed or best answered by you from Neil. Can a uni give guarantees that student bookings won't be cancelled in lieu of paid corporate bookings?
So again, I'm not aware that the university manages that, but the funding for Arsenal McLean is going to be dramatically cut. So I don't know how it will actually function and pay its bills.
Okay. Okay, I'll go to, we're down to 3 Smurf hands here. Mike O'Halloran, if you'd like to come in briefly and join the conversation. We might need to unmute him.
Hi, thanks, Owen. I just wanted to ask, just very quickly, was it ever considered that if the sports centre debt is kind of what feels like one of the main parts of the argument of the referendum, was there ever just a consideration to just cut that? I suppose what I'm really asking is why the reduction in the other 2 funds at all? If taking 100 out of the 244 would bring us down to the proposed 140-ish area, then why the reduction also required in the other 2 funds?
Okay, would someone like to address that?
Well, the university were also threatening on the idea of if we cut that €100, that other services would be cut. That's why it was also important, let's say, that we saw that certain things were still increased. And then students would have picked that 140 was like the maximum they wanted to pay. So it was kind of a target that we would have seen from and then would have been worked through with our working groups as well.
Yeah, there's been obviously a lot of questions, and I think I would call myself the innocent bystander here in that not currently being a student, although aspiring student to go back and study pretty soon, hopefully. But I have learned a certain amount about this referendum that if I were voting, I would have a lot to think about between now and Thursday. So I guess it's been informative to that point. I am going to take a few more questions, but I don't want to keep people much longer. I do hope that people who tuned in for the evening did get some progress on their understanding of the issue out of all the contributions from people this evening. There's a question, how will funding affect clubs and societies? Obviously, that would be the question for it if the referendum is passed, because obviously the current funding exists. We know how that works already. So the question is, how will funding affect clubs and societies?
Directly, there's a €93,000 increase directly to how much they get from the levy. Anyways.
Okay. Jenny asks what levies fund the quad and Arsa Cahill. I think what Jenny's alluding to there is funding for other buildings on campus. How does that break down, and what would set apart Arsenal McLean? Sharon, if you want to come in on that.
I wasn't going to come in on that, but I don't particularly understand the question, and that the levies wouldn't fund any other building, as far as I know, other than Oris and Mocklean. They wouldn't apply to anything at all. But I was just going to come back on your previous question there, really around how clubs and societies will be affected. And they have a potential significant loss of funding from the Student Project Fund going forward. And particularly, as we've said, you know, clubs would have received equipment to the value of $1 million over the last 5 years, and that's really significant.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. I am moving towards wrapping up. There are two, Rena, I do see you. Yes, I was going to get to you after I did my formalities there. There will, I expect 2 to 3 more questions, 1 or 2 comments, and I'll start wrapping up then. But Rena, if you'd like to go ahead.
Just very quickly, so Oris na Mocklean, the building itself, just like Oris Cahill or any of the buildings, are the difference with Oris na Mocklean is that because we had the funding, we were able to do extraordinary things, like the Cube was turned from just an empty room into an actual theatre space, the seating, the rigs, whatever societies and students wanted. It's a student building for students. It's managed by the Society's office. Any student can book a space in it, which you can't get you can only get space in the evening elsewhere on campus. And it could have stayed very basic, but students didn't want it very basic. They wanted great things in Oris na Mocklean, and that fund allows that to happen. And we have Mike O'Halloran on board now. We're working through getting everything updated and amazing. We're not supported by KELT or by the AV department because we're not a teaching space. And this allows us to be independent and extraordinary. And I think that's worth it.
As I say, I'm moving as fast as I can towards wrapping up, and some people are going to be disappointed with their hands raised. I'm sorry about that, but I'd like to get wide contributions. There's someone called Milena who's had their hand raised for quite some time. Milena, if you'd like to speak quickly. And someone's going to.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it. We've heard a lot of discussion going on, especially between 2 great institutions, which is the Students' Union, who do so much for students, as well as the Society's office, who do so much for students, and really helping this difficult time. And basically what I would like to ask is, after this referendum is done, however it might resolve, however it might go, like no or yes or whatever, will there be an event planned between the Students' Union and the Society's office to work through what went wrong and to see how that can be improved in the future? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take this. I still think it's very important. You know, we work with societies. Let's say we even have an event with them on Friday, the NUIG Chase. I don't mind plugging that as a fun event, and it's with 3 societies. And we will always work with them. I think the important thing after this, you know, is that this levy creates the baseline for any negotiations. And there might be time for another capital investment project that is actually much more planned out. That doesn't say up to 18 years. That actually says the exact costing. You know, maybe we can go to the likes of go to UCD or DCU and get a better sports centre that's even better than we currently have, that's actually in the centre of campus, that, you know, feels like the actual centre and a place that everyone wants to be.
So the answer to that question was yes. Right, I'm going to move on. Fee, you've had your hand up for a little while as well. Fee, who identifies as they or she, if you can come in quickly. Thank you. We'll get you unmuted shortly.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I hope you can hear me. Yeah. Can I ask for clarification on why the Students' Union wants to redirect money from the Student Project Fund directly to themselves? Is it because they want to be able to spend money as they choose without the oversight of the Project Fund Committee? And how can we trust a student union who will take hundreds of thousands of euro from the union and place it in shell companies without telling the students? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll take that one.
Okay, Park, yes.
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. So any of our money is, you know, if we're doing any big spending or we're doing any items, it goes to SU Council and the class reps fund. For example, €3 of this, if this is passed, is going towards the Irish language, and SU Council put that through. Any kind of funding like that, we will be going through SU Council, and it is students doing it. It's not a shell company, by the way. It's basically just it does hold the money, but it's not a shell company. It's just what, you know, it's still in the AGM. You'll still see it as as how much we have in reserves, and it's just held in a company.
Okay, I'm going to sort of start calling time here. I'm going to take the final question now. Milena has reiterated that her question was whether or not there will be a meeting between the SU Society's office and SU specifically after this referendum. I see nods of heads there. I see that. I hope, Milena, that addresses your question. Aoife, I'm going to take you very quickly, and that is the last question I'm taking from the floor. I know that causes great frustration to people with their hands raised, but we do have to call time at some point, and hope that we've informed people to some point. Aoife, very quickly, and that'll be the last thing going to the floor this evening.
Hi, thanks very much. This is just for the Students' Union in general. Just about the $500,000 that you have in reserve, more or less. I was just wondering, if you have that money in reserve to stop yourself from hopefully never going bankrupt, why do you need an increase in funding? Why can't you give us a specific reasoning for funding? Why is there no plans for what you're going to use that funding for? You do have other income from the likes of lockers and the college bar, from ticket sales and various events and everything. And also, why can't you perhaps consider, because you have very little evidence as far as I can tell from your own documentation online, that you actually do need this funding currently. So why, if it is a case that you don't necessarily need all this funding and this is all preventative money, why can't you reallocate some of that to some of the likes of the Áras na Mac Léinn Fund and the Student Project Fund that we actually do need more funding for?
Yeah, very happy to take that. Thank you. So the Students' Union is all our expenditure is completely student-led. You know, we're a non-profit. We don't look for profit. All the money gets reinvested into students, but there has to be something there. You know, has to be tangible money there for for when anything happens. I did mention this earlier. We'd love to follow the likes of the UK students' unions that have their own accommodation, that built it, that is basically. It's so dirt cheap for rent that anyone can afford it, and it massively reduces barriers to education, because as we know, accommodation is one when we talk about education. So that would be the long-term dream of having something that you can use your investment for. But realistically, the Students' Union, whenever we've had money, we've created projects that have done a lot. Explore. We started student mentoring, or and then also came. So things like that can happen. And SU Council students are the ones that are able to be in control. It's not the SU. It's literally just students. I didn't start the €3 towards Irish language. That was from SU Council that brought that in.
Okay, at this point, I'm although there are still many raised hands and questions coming in, I am going to start calling time, because we've heard from the Students' Union, we've heard from the university, we've heard from some of the SOCs and clubs and representatives, we've heard from the Society's office and other bodies. It is a referendum. It is for you to decide from the information that you've been presented with what you think the best outcome would be, and to use your vote on Thursday between 9 and 8 p.m. The voting's online. There's a special website on it. Student Union Society's page. Sorry, it's not Society's, excuse me, the Students' Union website. Sliff could have got me in bother there. I would encourage everybody who took the time to take part and listen this evening. It's a browbeating listen. I'm here trying to do my best to moderate, and I do agree with the comment that a lot of the questions went to a smaller group of people, and that's what happens when you take the questions publicly. There was no design to throw all the questions or grill one person, anything like that. It's just how the cards fell on this evening. So I'd like to thank first off all the students who respect themselves enough to sit here for an hour and a half and listen to this and make their own decisions, and also all the participants who took their Monday, or is it still Monday? I don't know. But whatever day this is, that you took this evening to answer questions, address things, and have a bit of spirited debate on the way, which is an important part of referendum. So thanks to everybody for taking part. As you can hear, I'm going hoarse and I wasn't even talking half the time. So if anybody wants to X out at this point, you're welcome to. And thanks again to everybody who facilitated this, took part, and I know the frustration of not getting your question answered. You will never really like me again. That's fine. I'm not here to be liked or disliked, but that happens in these situations. Do read up everything you can between now and the referendum, and I do encourage you all to vote. So just X out, go home, relax, enjoy your evening, and think about things on Thursday.